On today's show, the Knicks are in disarray, raising the question, did the Nets strike gold with their Mikal Bridges trade? I'll analyze that question and how New York's struggles could impact Brooklyn's rebuild plans on today's episode of Locked On Nets.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Nets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. The show is 100% free on all those great platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And on today's episode, we're one day away from another Nets-Knicks matchup, and there are a lot of storylines going into this one, mainly tied to New York struggles as of late. So I got Lucas Kaplan coming on the show. We're going to talk about New York struggles. We're going to talk about the Mikal Bridges trade, and we're going to talk about whether the Nets have improved their future outlook by trading for all of these Knicks picks. So we'll get into all that right now. Let's go. All right, back on the show now, we got Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily. And Lucas, we're here to talk a little bit about the Knicks and obviously the Nets, but it is recording this on Tuesday night. It is the second Nets-Knicks matchup of the season on Wednesday. And the Knicks are, I think it's fair to say, in disarray right now. And with that, that has a lot of significance to the Nets, to a Nets organization and a Nets team that obviously has shorted the Knicks' future and owns a lot of stock in their downfall. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about whether we think this Knicks, stint is a blip, whether we think that it's a sign of things to come. How does that impact the Nets rebuild? Did they strike gold with this Mikal Bridges trade? We'll answer all those questions. But just getting quickly into what's going on in Knicks world, the Knicks have lost 9 of their last 11 games. They rank 25th in offense, 28th in defense, and 26th in net rating during that span. They're coming off a game where they lost to the Skeleton Crew Mavericks by 18 at Madison Square Garden, and we're down by as much as 30, and we're getting booed off the court during that game. And obviously, they made a head coaching switch. Mike Brown, they fired Tibbs. Some people were surprised by that move. Some people weren't. That doesn't seem like it's going too well. Cat's getting booed. There's just a lot going on there. And the Nets own the Knicks' first-round picks in 2027, 2029, 2031. They also have a swap in 2028. And what do you know it? All of those picks are unprotected. So this Knicks stretch, it must be said that they could right the ship. We're going to get into whether we think that they will. But they're playing a Nets team tomorrow. It could be the perfect get-right game for them. But overall, it's not looking great right now in Knicks world. And with the Nets owning a lot of stock in their downfall, this is not a negative development for the Nets, or for some Nets fans who I'm sure are victory lapping this, in their homes, on social media. Some might try to in MSG tomorrow. But Lucas, when you look at this Knicks team, just what is going on with this Knicks team right now? Because I don't think anybody could have envisioned it going this poorly, this quickly.
Well, I don't know. I think that the play-in game at Barclays between the Knicks and Nets, at least it'll be cheaper than, if it was at MSG. I don't know. It is it's an 11 game stretch. I don't want to say, things are falling apart or it's going, to determine their season. But I mean, I follow some very, talented and I think impartial beat writers and people that cover the team, and they just say that feel like it's kind of a broken product, and you watch them, and I don't know if it's permanently broken, but something needs to change for them. And in fact, it's so bad that I'm almost worried that they're going to go through the really rough period this year and then get better for 2027. It's happening too quickly, if anything, for Nets fans. But it's great news. If you're a Nets fan, you own all this long-term Knicks stock. Every odd year, you have their first round draft pick, thanks to that Mikal Bridges trade. And it's so tough to make definitive conclusions when you're in the dog days, right? When you're in January, when you're before the All-Star break. But all the reporting and stuff it just seems like something is not right, and it's not a something that can be fixed with an inventive substitution pattern or a change to the pick and roll defense, right? Something does seem institutionally icky with the Knicks right now. And if there was ever a time to root for a Nets win in this tanking season, I have to think that it would be on Wednesday night at MSG.
I would agree, from a Nets fan's perspective, because if the Knicks lose to the Nets for the first time in however many years that would be, and that continues this, and that's off the heels of probably one of the worst losses of the Jalen Brunson era, man, that would be a sight to behold. And I'm excited to be in MSG tomorrow just for the prospect of not that happening, not that I'm like rooting for it, but I just want to see how the crowd reacts, like what goes on in that arena, because it seemed like it was such a toxic environment in there during that Mavs game, and also in the locker room, like you just talk about it. And I think that the Knicks firing Tibbs was a controversial decision, obviously, for some. But I think for the Nets, like from their perspective, it wasn't really, I think it was kind of almost viewed as a positive, because I think you could say Tibbs as a coach, you kind of knew what you were getting with him, with that group. And it seemed like they had somewhat of a floor with Tibbs. And now you bring in Mike Brown, much different personality, obviously has a different approach to some things on the court and in the locker room. It was much more of an unknown. And it seemed like the Knicks kind of shedding that floor and going for ceiling. And right now, like we'll get into what we think is wrong on the court, but in the locker room, it seems like there's a lot going on there. It seems like there was a lot going on there last season and this season, whether you talk about Karl-Anthony Towns, whether you talk about Mikal Bridges, some of the other things that are going on. It seems like there's a lot of players that aren't buying into their roles right now. Like that has been some of the reporting. So that's obviously concerning. And when you have a head coach who's, 30 whatever games into it, and you're already hearing that stuff, like it can't be dismissed that the prospect of them just righting that ship, like they definitely could, but it happening this fast, that you're hearing about issues like that, could be kind of endemic of a larger issue that is kind of deeper seated into the core of the team right now.
Yeah, and it makes you think about like the 2029 and all the Knicks picks really that the Nets own, right? As it sounds silly to say this, but you can't underestimate how quickly perceived value changes in the NBA in terms of if the Nets are trying to make whatever trade this summer, for an upgrade, right? A roster upgrade, a guy they want to buy low on, or a burgeoning all-star, whatever, I don't know, right? These Knicks picks become the talk of the town. And it sounds silly because we're just talking about 11 games in January, 5 years before that 2031 pick comes due. But you look at Michael Porter Jr. be the third or fourth best player on a title team, right? And right, all the, misgivings about his defense and his rebounding. And then all of a sudden, a year later, he's a negative asset. And then 7 months later, he's back to a positive asset and everyone's talking about him on the trade block. Like stuff just moves so quickly. And when you're looking at the Nets, who have one lottery pick upcoming this season, but then after that, you would probably assume that it's going to be a very heavy, build through the trade machine type of rebuild, right? Those are the assets that they have. They have that unprotected Denver pick, and it looks really cool, and they have some of their own picks, and they have these 3 Knicks picks, and every loss, even if they don't own New York's pick this year, just kind of gets folded into the way we talk about their draft assets and the Knicks' future, and if you want a part of that. And again, you were very professional, right? But I write for Nets Daily, a blog. I hope the Nets win tomorrow. I'll say it.
Okay. Lucas just comes right out with that. And Lucas, respect you for that. But yeah, I mean, just talking quickly about what is going wrong with the Knicks on the court. We're going to talk in the second segment about their asset situation. Can they right the ship? But just on the court, I've had this question since the Knicks made that Karl-Anthony Towns trade and kind of gambled their last trade chips on that move, because they had obviously, given away most of the farm in the Mikal Bridges trade. As soon as they made that trade, I think me and a lot of other people had the thought of man, that's going to be a really talented offense, but can you build a championship level defense when your top 2 players in Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns are such glaring negatives on that end? And obviously those guys got picked on mercilessly as that Indiana Pacers series went on. And we're seeing that again this season. And the defense, like, they just can't stop anybody. And, like, I think that they can still be a very good team. But it does seem like the Karl-Anthony Towns aspect of this conversation, like Jalen Brunson, I think, he is what he is, like you kind of know. But the Karl-Anthony Towns situation this season has seemed like it's trended so far in a different direction than what we saw last season in terms of he's still a glaring negative defensively. And then offensively, the three-point shooting has regressed. The shooting at the rim has regressed. He's just driving into Dwight Powell and kicking him in the nuts like 100 times, looking for fouls during that game on Monday. And it just seems like they're just kind of searching for answers. And with Cat, it's not just that. We also heard in the playoffs last season after it, I think it was James Edwards and Fred Katz wrote a piece with The Athletic, and they said that a lot of Knicks players took some issue with Karl-Anthony Towns kind of going rogue defensively on some assignments and not executing defensive coverages throughout the season. So it seems like there's some issues in the locker room with Cat. We all know that he has some of these deficiencies, and that's why, like, when the Minnesota Timberwolves made that trade, they obviously thought that they were getting a good deal there, and a lot of these deficiencies that are now rearing their head were a big reason for that. And the Knicks are now locked into Cat's contract long term. Like, we'll get into that more in the second segment, but it just seems like the Cat-Jalen pairing, I have some serious questions about the viability of that duo making a sustained deep playoff run.
And part of it is because Mitchell Robinson, who I love and is great, is not Rudy Gobert in terms of, like, he's not going to play 35 minutes a night, 80 games a year, defensive player of the year-ish level defense all season long. And that is what made the Cat-Rudy pairing so good in Minnesota. Just like Cat at the 4 is never great, right? For a few reasons, just him in more space, and you mitigate some of his defensive rebounding effect. Like, he is a good defensive rebounder, even at the 5. And this is what helps him at his best retain value. And then if you play him next to a center, it's like, well, that loses a little bit of value. All that being said, like, I can't even, and I haven't watched every single game, and I'm not going to pretend like I have, but when you watch them right now, it doesn't even feel like something I can describe in X's and O's, right? Like, Mike Brown said it. It's, at halftime of the Mavs game, we weren't going like, oh, well, there's got to be an X out, and hey, we want you hedging on Klay Thompson's, when he comes off screens. It was like, do your effing job. Like, it's beyond a technical problem at this point. And that's music to the ears of Nets fans, I suppose.
You also have Mike Brown, who, like, I'm not going to act like this is a huge deal, but they had a pretty, like, contentious game with the Warriors where Draymond Green, had the thing where he grabbed Cat's foot. He could have seriously injured him on that play. And then after the game, another game the Knicks lost while they're spiraling, Mike Brown's all smiles. He's given Draymond Green a big hug. And I think Ramona Shelburne went on ESPN and said that, like, that did not sit well with people within the Nets or within the Knicks organization. It just doesn't seem like anything is going right there right now. Like, it's just a very weird situation from top to bottom with the personnel they have, with the guy they brought in to lead the team, and with just a lot of the struggles that are ensuing. So with that, we need to answer the question, do we think the Knicks can right this ship? Or do we think the Nets have struck gold with this Mikal Bridges trade? We'll revisit the Mikal Bridges trade. We'll talk about how we think the Knicks can try to navigate this moving forward when we continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. Guys, Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern, I become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new. Boosts, bonuses, and surprises. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. The timing is perfect. Right before the games and right before the weekend starts. It adds extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, coming back from the break on today's Locked On Nets episode, got Lucas Kaplan here talking about the Nets and the Knicks, and the Knicks' struggles as of late and how that will impact the Nets' future. As we said, The Nets own the Knicks first round pick in 2027, 2029, 2031, also a swap in 2028. All of those unprotected. So with the way the Knicks are struggling right now, can they right this ship? We need to answer that. First thing that I want to answer with you, Lucas, and I want to get your opinion. Do you think that they can right this ship without making any drastic personnel changes this season? Like if they roll through with this core, which is something that I think Chris Mannix, some other people who are tapped into the Knicks organization have said the plan is to, can they right this ship? I think they can to some degree, in my opinion, but I think that it seems like there needs to be, some kind of change to shake up what's going on right now because they're searching for answers and it doesn't really know like they understand where they should be searching right now.
That's a good way to put it. And it all depends what does fix mean, right? Like, do I actually expect them to drop to the play-in? Not really. Do I expect them to lose in the first round? I mean, probably not, but who knows, right? Like a close first round series could come down to how hot Jalen Brunson gets in the fourth quarter, and he could like very easily make a million tough shots and the Knicks beat the Sixers again in 6 games in the first round, right? So righting the ship, yeah, sure, this season. Again, the Nets don't own any Knicks picks this season, but in terms of like believing that this, without any major shakeup, aside from, exchanging campaign for Jordan Clarkson and bringing Yabusele in and Kolek's emergence, like aside from those moves, it does not feel right now, and it's easy to say this now, like this starting five, like this specific construct of the team, the skeleton of it is going to be able to accomplish what the Knicks are, planning to accomplish in the next, in this immediate time frame. So in that sense, no. And I think that is what really matters, right, for the Knicks and the Nets in terms of fixing this season and this iteration of the roster.
Because in the Knicks' eyes, and I think in the organization's eyes and in the fan base's eyes, fixing it would mean winning a championship. Because kind of ironically and hilariously, like James Dolan did his first at-length like media appearance right before this stretch started and went on, I think it was with Carton on The Fan, and said like they need to make the finals and they need to win the finals. And that's the expectation. And as soon as he said that, like everything has just gone to shit. And it seems like that, if you talk about the question of are they going to be able to right the ship, I agree with you. In like the big picture, I think that that's going to need to come in the form of some personnel changes. And if you look at it, they don't have no flexibility, but they have not a ton of flexibility. Like they can trade first round pick swaps in 2026, 2030, 2032. They can't trade a first round pick outright. Like they can trade that Wizards pick, which is not really a pick because the Wizards aren't going to allow that to convey. Like they would chop off the legs of pretty much every player on their roster before I think they would let that pick get past 8 where it's protected. So the Knicks have 3 swaps that they can trade. They have some players that I guess they can maneuver, but like their flexibility, they largely like kind of went all in and like made their moves already in the form of the Mikal Bridges trade primarily, and then the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. And we need to revisit it somewhat, just like that Mikal Bridges trade. When they made it, I thought that, I think I gave them like a B- on the trade when I did my trade grades piece for Clutch Points. I thought it was a pretty crazy move on their part at the time. And, a lot of people say like that could be a biased take, but now looking back on it, like the fact that they traded 5 first-round picks for like, he's a nice player, sure, but it's not like there were like no concerns about him and his archetype. And they traded 5 first-round picks for that guy when you have not long after a guy like Giannis who has pretty clearly voiced that he wanted to play for the Knicks. Like it seems like there's been a lot of copium, in the Knicks Twitterverse and things like that, but man, like what a miscalculation by the Knicks. Like that was, I've spoken to Knicks fans in my life and they've said that like Leon Rose, I mean, he was like a godsend. He was killing it. And he might ultimately be remembered for this one trade that just seems like it was such a misstep and an overpay. Like I just looking back on it, it's just kind of crazy to me.
Erik, it was 5 picks and a swap. I just want to set the record straight. We call him 6-pick Mick for...
And a high second-round pick, I think. Also.
Yeah, like the 31 overall pick. it seemed, they were like not a slightly, but what if Tyrese Halliburton's shot in game 1 bounces out, right? Like, are they in the finals last year? If they're in the finals, does Shea like sprain his ankle? They did get to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and it was a great series against Indiana. And so, like, from that angle, you can. Listen, it wasn't a positive value trade for the Knicks, I don't think, but I don't know. I'm just bringing it up just to kind of play devil's advocate here. I don't really I wasn't really going anywhere with this. Like, I wouldn't trade 6 picks for him.
I mean, I hear you. And like, but you can say that about, the Pacers series. You could also say like they were not that far away from losing that first round series to the Detroit Pistons. And like, if that happens, what else happens if the Celtics don't blow 2 20-point leads, and just completely implode in those games? So like, you can say that anyway, but I just think that it was a pretty crazy move. And then like, you trade, Julius Randle, who was obviously kind of a distressed asset, at least in the eyes of Knicks fans in that organization, for Karl Anthony Towns. And like, that move looked good last season, and now it's not aging that well. And like, you look at both of those players, like those are the 2 guys that they traded all their assets for. And this, folds into the question of, can they get out of this moving forward? Like, what is their flexibility moving forward? They don't really have that much flexibility, because if you look at Cat now, like, what players on their team that they're actually going to consider trading are like significantly positive value assets. Like Cat, I don't really know if you're getting that much for Cat. Mikal, you can get something for him. I don't know if it's that much. Like, the guys that I would look at are probably OG, Deuce McBride, like guys like that. Like, I just don't think that.
I mean, even OG is making a lot of money.
Yeah, he's making, and an injury prone player.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, listen, it would really be like Cat as the second. I mean, you keep hearing about Cat for Giannis, right? That's like the framework that could save them this summer. And Giannis, you can question how he'll age and this and that. But if Cat kind of, again, we talk about like perceived value around the league, like Cat kind of going through this right now and taking a legitimate, I don't know about a permanent, but a legitimate step back from last year in terms of impact. And then you look at their picks, it's like, well, they have a Washington pick this year that's protected 1 through 8, so they don't have that. They have their own pick this year. They have no first round picks in 27, and then they have their own in 30 and 32. And 2028, I believe.
Yeah, they could only trade swaps on those. They can trade a swap this season, they can trade a swap in 2030, and they can trade a swap in 2032. That's it. So
they have like essentially two swaps and Cat, or maybe 3. I don't know. And then you could loop a third team in, whatever. But if it's just funny how much of this iteration of the Knicks might just come down to, is Milwaukee willing to like view Cat as a super plus asset that they're excited to bring in for Giannis?
Dude,
like,
why would they do that? Like,
I don't know.
Up. Like, I know, like, the only way that I can ever see that happening, and this is going to be a big conversation with the Knicks, and if we're talking about the Nets and the value of the future Knicks picks, like, Giannis is going to factor into the equation because we know that he has interest in playing for Milwaukee. So the only way that I see that happening is if Giannis puts the gas pedal down to the floor and says, I want to play for the Knicks. I'm only going to play for the Knicks. I'm only going to sign an extension with the Knicks. Trade me to the Knicks. And really just turns himself into the bad guy in a way that we just haven't seen him do yet. Like, all Giannis does, he's like petrified of making a public trade request. He waffles back and forth like something you've never, ever seen before. So, like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm not going to say that, like, Giannis can't be a Knick. I wouldn't be mystified if it happened. But if I'm the Bucks, like, if you're looking at Cat and then maybe like an OG or Mikal and trying to reroute those guys and get whatever picks you can get alongside Cat, I don't know, man. Like, that just seems like there would be way better packages out there than that.
I mean, I'm with you. I don't know. Maybe it's easier for the Knicks to like focus on this season and then regroup at the next summer and see what's up, just because it doesn't feel like they're that close, right, to fixing this issue. And then all of a sudden you're just going to spring like a mid-season, huge shakeup. That just doesn't seem feasible for them for some reason. And I don't know, maybe a lot of the national media is from New York and they want Giannis in New York and it'd be fun. But other than that, like, I just don't see where this is going for them. So, wow, pretty positive.
Do you see a move out there? Like, do you see a way that you think that they can maneuver this to their benefit? Like the way that it would really, to me, like I think the best way to phrase it is it would be like a reshuffling. Like you would kind of try to have to make like a lateral move that you view as like an upgrade in terms of like internal development, or that guy coming in and shaking things up. Like, I don't think they're taking the guys on this roster with the, kind of lack of flexibility that they have and the lack of assets that they have and upgrading it. I think they'd have to kind of make a lateral move and hope that that switch up kind of sparks something within them, which is, that would be a risk, obviously.
Yeah. And maybe you ship out the guys or the people that you think might be responsible for like a locker room, rift or disconnect. But at this point, we're getting way too far down the rabbit hole for a team that is like supposed to be actively contending. And again, another disclaimer, it's been 11 games. Like, who knows? It feels early. I don't want to write the obituary, but it's just, they're in the middle of something pretty sticky, like it's not just a blip anymore.
Yeah, and that's, I think that's the major takeaway. I think you said it well. And for the Nets, last thing I want to close it out on is like this stretch, it's only 11 games. The Knicks could rattle off 10 straight. We don't know. Like things change quickly in the NBA. It's undoubtedly a positive though. And I think that the main way that it's a positive is what Lucas said earlier in terms of perception, because like the Knicks could right this ship down the line. But when you get into this offseason, when you get maybe into the next transaction cycle after that, at the next deadline, the Nets can take these picks from the Knicks. They can take those 2029, 2031 picks, and you can shop them around. And if the perception is that the Knicks are trending in the wrong direction, whether or not they actually are and whether or not they actually are able to right the ship, like it's not like the fruit is only going to be able to, the Nets are only going to be able to bear that fruit in 2029 or 2031. They can do it on the trade market before them. So the way that these perceptions change, on like a bi-monthly or half a year basis, that plays a big role in the outlook for the Nets moving forward, who are undoubtedly going to be very active on the trade market. So we'll see how that plays out during tomorrow's Nets-Knicks matchup. But the last thing that we want to close the show out on is Jimmy Butler sustained a season-ending torn ACL, and that has significance to the Nets because the Golden State Warriors are one of the teams that were most frequently linked to Michael Porter Jr. in a potential trade ahead of this year's deadline. So does Jimmy Butler's injury make a Michael Porter Jr. to the Warriors trade more likely or less likely? We'll answer that question when we close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. Guys, new year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications, because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. Guys, I love how simple Quo makes everything. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number so nothing gets missed. Everyone sees the full conversation thread, which makes replies faster and more personal. It works right from your phone or computer, and you can even keep your existing number. It's no surprise Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. So make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free plus 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedOnNBA. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNBA. Quo. No missed calls, no missed customers. All right, coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode with Lucas Kaplan. And Lucas, want to hit on the Jimmy Butler injury because I think that this injury changes the NBA's trade landscape, I think, pretty significantly, and the Nets are obviously going to be a pretty significant player at this year's deadline, at least in terms of trying to sell. But some guys, or at least gauge the market for some guys, and Michael Porter Jr. is one of those main guys. And we had heard a ton of smoke about Michael Porter Jr. potentially being a Warriors target, with them trying to build around Steph Curry for one last run. And now with Jimmy Butler, tearing his ACL and being out for the season, that brings up a question of, does that make it so they're not going to do anything because they're just out of it? Does that make it so they, kind of look more desperately to replace Jimmy Butler and add something else so this team doesn't completely just crater? My viewpoint on this is I think you can look at it either way, but I think that this injury to Jimmy Butler makes an MPJ trade to the Warriors very less likely, in my opinion, because I just think that the Warriors, I don't know how interested they were going to be in trading like 2 first-round picks for Michael Porter Jr., which is something that the Nets obviously want. A lot of Nets fans think that's fair value for MPJ. I don't know how, eager they were to do that. And now with Jimmy Butler being out for the season and them really having you can't even really talk yourself into them being a contender. I just think that it just wouldn't make much sense. And I understand the argument the other way. The argument the other way would be, look, hey, we have Steph. He's 37. He's playing out of his mind. We should try to do right by him. And just whatever happens after this era, it is what it is, greatest player in franchise history. That is an argument. But the way that I'm reading it is I think that they're probably leaning the other direction of we shouldn't just be reckless.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if they didn't buy into that argument 2-3 years ago, then I just don't see them buying into it now. Now that 5 things have gone wrong since then, and this is completely unsourced. I have no idea what they're thinking in there, but attaching extra assets to get off of Jimmy's money when, it's only for another year and a half and it feels like such a final blow is just not something I see them doing when they've been so hesitant to act over the last 3 or 4 years. They really didn't make an all-in trade until they could get Jimmy for what they give up 1 first-round pick last year. They still have every first-round pick except for 1 in their arsenal. I just don't see it. Theoretically, right? It makes a lot of sense in theory because now you have Jimmy's money, and now that it's just a contract that you're trading for, it makes negotiations theoretically a little bit easier. But and then there's also the Bernie Lee to Brooklyn connection, right? He represents Ben Simmons, I should say. I think he enjoyed his time,
he doesn't
representing
represent
Ben.
He doesn't represent.
Oh, he doesn't
Simmons anymore. No, he dropped them. He's not getting. He missed out on those 10% commission checks from the Professional Fishing Association of Florida. He's not reaping the rewards of that partnership anymore. But I agree with you. I think that I posted a trade on Twitter earlier today. I sent you guys kind of an iteration of it, but the only thing that I was thinking throwing ideas against the wall is if the Warriors could somehow get off of Jimmy Butler's contract and replace him with MPJ while also getting something for Kuminga that they view as an upgrade into the rotation. You'd have to get off a lot to do it. I wouldn't do it if I were them, but that is something that I think you could talk yourself into of we have Steph. We can't just let him toil away at the end of his career. That's just not doing right by him. A lot of the fan base would be angry about that. So I think the trade I posted was the Nets get Jimmy, they get the 2026 and 2028 first round picks from the Warriors. The Warriors send, they also get Moody, the Nets. The Warriors send Kuminga to the Kings, and then they get DeRozan, MPJ. I think I also had Terrence Mann going to the Warriors as an extra sweetener for the Nets. So I wouldn't do that if I were the Warriors, but I don't think it's the craziest thing. It would at least make them interesting for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I think MPJ would still be such a perfect fit in their system, just a high volume movement shooter. I would love to watch him in Golden State, and for the Nets, if Golden State's really out of it, it's a more leverage, right? That is gone, and so I don't know how many destinations MPJ really has at this point, or if this means, right, it could just mean the Nets are far more likely to trade him in the summer. It's not like this deadline is the last time they can get something cooking on that front.
Yeah, and I think it must be said for the Warriors, a big part of this calculus also is that when you get into the offseason, you can kind of regroup. You have Jimmy as an expiring contract. You have all your picks available to trade. And that's not just the case for the Warriors. That's also a case for a team like the Bucks in the offseason. They'll have more first-round picks to trade. A lot of teams will have more picks to trade. So, that could hold some teams out, especially with the looming Giannis sweepstakes, which could factor in to the Warriors conversation. That will factor into the calculus of a lot of teams around the league. And then it might not be a negative for the Nets because you get to the trade debt or you get to the offseason and teams have more picks to trade. They know what's what. But, it does seem like MPJ is the best player available on the market right now. We'll just see, if the Warriors are out of it, That's one less destination. Maybe they were never a destination to begin with, but ultimately it does impact the calculus for the Nets. But Lucas, that's all I got for you on today's episode of Locked On Nets. Appreciate you taking the time as always. I will see you at MSG tomorrow. And hey, maybe we're, watching some just complete bedlam tomorrow at the Garden.
The Nets are going to win either way, so it's all good.
That does it for today's episode of Locked On Nets. Hope you guys enjoyed the talk with Lucas. If you do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you guys enjoy my content, take a second, smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. Nets got the Knicks on Wednesday night at MSG, so I'll have coverage of all that and more when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.